Kunjabihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Rachachana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rachachana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanashari Yamuna Tiravanashari Yamuna Tiravanashari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Prabhupada, Sutra Shatta Sri Sri Mata Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Jayantai Go Premanande. Glories to the assembled Lord. All glories to the assembled Lord. All glories to the assembled Lord. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Jagannath, Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai, Sri Sri Gauritai Ki Jai. Jai Jai Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
We all successfully memorized the start of the Bhagavatam. That's very nice, no? That's where we begin, and today we'll continue in the 4th canto, part 2 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I believe the verse is 73?
Yes.
29, 73, right? Okay. Lucky. Not the wrong verse. Anyway, so Hare Krishna. I'm Jananivas Dasa, and was asked to speak today, which is an honor and a bit of a scare because I haven't spoken about the Bhagavatam publicly for a while. So I ask for your blessings to not say too many stupid things. I probably will, be prepared. So I feel also free to point out any mistakes I'm making. It's nice to correct them in front of Prabhupada. It's sort of high association we're speaking with. So, you know Adipurush, right? Adipurusha Prabhu, he was here for Bhakti Shastri, I think, a few times.
Yeah.
When I started giving class, I asked him, Prabhu, do you have any advice? You know, it's a bit weird to speak about things I don't really understand. And then he said, yes, he knows the problem. And he has a meditation. And he told me, just before the class, you approach the Lord. And you say, my dear Lord, I'm an idiot. You know it, and I know it. But my audience doesn't know it yet. So now it's up to you to reveal it or not. Yes, let's see how we go. In any case, we'll try to speak a little bit on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, let's do the verse now. Chapter 29, text 73 of the 4th canto. And yeah, let's look at the Sanskrit. Thanks for writing. Please repeat after me. Arte,
Arte,
hi,
avidyamane,
api, sansritir, na, nivartate, dhyayato, vishayan, asya, svapne, anarthagamo, yata, atehya vidya manepi, arthehya vidya manepi, sansritirna nivartate, sansritirna nivartate, dhyayato vishayanasya, dhyayato vishayanasya, svapne narthagamo yata, svapne narthagamo yata, arthehya vidyamanepi, samsritirna nivartate, dhyayato vishayanasya, svapne narthagamo yata, arthehya vidyamanepi,
Arteya vidyamane
Sansritirna nivartate
Samsitirna nivartate
Dhyayato vishayanasya
Dhyayato vishayanasya
Swapnena arthagamo yata.
Swapnena arthagamo yata. Arteya vidyamane Adyeya vidmyamane ti
Arteya vidyamane pi
Samsritirna nivartate Dhyayato vishayanasya
Dhyayato vishayanasya
Swapnena arthagamo yata.
Swapnena arthagamo yata.
Arteya vidyamane pi
Arteya vidyamane pi
Samsritirna nivartate
Sansritirna nivartate
Dhyayato vishayanasya
Dhyayato vishayanasya
Swapnena arthagamo yata.
Swapnena arthagamo yata. Happy? Okay. Arte, sense objects.
Sense objects.
He,
He.
certainly.
Certainly.
Avidyamane,
Navidyamane.
not being present.
Not be present.
Api,
Api.
although.
Although.
Sansritihi,
Samsriti.
material existence.
Material existence.
Na,
Na.
never.
Never.
Nivartate,
Nivartate.
ceases.
Ceases.
Dhyayata,
Dhyayata.
meditating.
Meditate.
Dhyan, of course. Yes. Vishayan,
Vijaya.
on sense objects.
On sense objects.
Asya,
Asya.
of the living being.
Of the living being.
Swapne,
Swapne.
in dream.
Dream.
Anartha,
Anartha.
of unwanted things.
Of unwanted things.
Agamaha,
Agama.
appearance.
Appearance.
Yatta,
Yata.
as.
As.
Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. When the living entity dreams, the sense objects are not actually present. However, because one has associated with the sense objects, they become manifest. Similarly, the living entity with undeveloped senses does not cease to exist materially, even though he may not be exactly in contact with the sense objects. Purport. It is sometimes said that because a child is innocent, he is completely pure. Actually, this is not the fact. Krishna Prem was saying that yesterday already. He's confirmed. The effects of fruitive activities reserved in the subtle body appear in three concurrent stages. One is called bija, the root. Another is called kutastha, the desire. And another is called phalon mukha, about to fructify. The manifest stage is called prarabdha, already in action. Prarabdha karma. So a good way to check one's prarabdha karma is to look in the mirror, for example. Then we see our karma. Yes? This body is made of karma, and that's called prarabdha, that which is already there, which is you can already perceive. And the other forms are a little more subtle. In a conscious or unconscious state, the action of the subtle or gross bodies may not be manifest. But such states cannot be called the liberated state. So even though we don't have a subtle or gross body, doesn't mean we're yet liberated. Therefore, a child may be innocent, but this does not mean that he is a liberated soul. Everything is held in reservation, and everything will become manifest in due course of time. Even in the absence of certain manifestations in the subtle body, the objects of sense enjoyment may act. The example has been given of a nocturnal emission, in which the physical senses act even when the physical objects are not manifest. The three modes of material nature may not be manifest in the subtle body, but the contamination of the three modes remains conserved, and in due course of time it becomes manifest. Even if the reactions of the subtle and gross bodies are not manifest, One does not become free from the material conditions. Therefore, it is wrong to say that a child is as good as a liberated soul. Prabhupada hammering that point. Nice. One more time the verse. When the living entity dreams, the sense objects are not actually present. However, because one has associated with the sense objects, they become manifest. Similarly, the living entity with undeveloped senses does not cease to exist materially, even though he may not be exactly in contact with the sense objects. So let's pray for the blessings of the teacher and our Lord to say something useful. Om Agyantimirandhasya Gyanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yutta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavascha Sri Rupam Sakachatam Sahagana Ragunatanvitam Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parichana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanvitam Scha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarupyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Sri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nice. So, like I came into these verses from the outside. I guess many of you have been listening to all these verses continuously for a while now, but for me it was like, okay, where are we at? Because sometimes Bhagavatam gets a little bit confusing, since Bhagavatam very beautifully is written in different layers of activity, right? We get like a conversation within 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 a conversation. I'm actually not exaggerating, I think that's exactly where we're at. So I thought let's start a little bit at zooming out and looking where we actually are and what we're actually talking about. Why are we listening about nocturnal emissions and dreams and non-dreams? What's the question? What's the answer? What's going on? So, one sunny day, the great king, Parikshit Maharaj, went on a stroll into the forest. And we know the story. He met a yogi. He was thirsty. He wanted some water. It was hot. And the yogi just ignored him rudely. Later turned out wasn't so rude. He was actually absorbed in samadhi, which is not rude at all. That's actually sort of the goal. But in that moment, Parikshit Maharaj got offended. He took a snake, put it as a garland around its head. The yogi didn't find that all that funny and went like, okay, you put the garland around my neck in form of a snake, so may a snake come. Oh, not him actually, his son. But Parikshit Maharaj, he got cursed. Yes, see, there the faults are sneaking in. But it's good sometimes to recover. Good. So he got cursed that within 7 days he will die by the bite of a snake. Really far out flying super snake, but yes, that was the promise, that was the curse or blessing. Because Parikshit Maharaj didn't take it as a curse, but became very humble and took it as a blessing and decided, okay, I've got 7 days left. That's excellent actually, because who has the blessing to know when we will die? Yeah? We don't know. I'm not sure if I'm going to finish the class. There's no guarantee. Right? No, it's true, isn't it? And actually this is part of the teachings. We'll come back later. Because here's really the point is being stressed. We're not eternal, so let's make the best of our life. And Parikshit had the same realization. So off to the Ganges. What should I do with my 7 days? Let me try through the most sublime sense of hearing. Let me try to, as good as I can, have darshan through the sound of a Vaishnava by hearing continuously for 7 days. Now the only question left is, well, who's qualified to do it? So all sorts of sages assembled at the Ganges. And everyone, well, you know, if such a high quality activity is going on, because this is Leela, right? Krishna is directly involved, not anyone's just going to start speaking. right? So everyone was there, lots of qualified brahmanas, but no one was feeling I'm the one that should be speaking, till the point that it became very clear who's supposed to be speaking, because the speaker came, funnily enough, nakedly as a young boy, complete avaduta, walked in, and we have the darshan in the beginning of the Bhagavatam of Shukadev Goswami, who without any doubt takes the Vyasa-san. No one is offended, everyone knows, yes, of course he should be speaking. So he sits down, and then this conversation starts between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev Goswami. So our first layer of the Bhagavatam is the story, and now we're diving into the second layer, the conversation between Parikshit and Shukadev. This is our first conversational layer, but actually it's already the second layer in the Bhagavatam. Okay, and then what does Shukadev start speaking about? Anyone remembers? What's the first thing he's talking about? Where does he start? Well, he sort of confirms Parikshit Maharaj's worry in a more global sense, because he says, well, you have 7 days, but actually this whole humanity doesn't have much longer because Kali Yuga is approaching. So he starts talking about Kali Yuga, the approach of Kali Yuga, and the reaction of the sages of Naimisharanya. That rings a bell. Naimisharanya, that forest where all the sages were gathering in order to perform great sacrifices and discuss and counteract the effects of the Kali Yuga. And of course, just as in the assembly of Shukadev Goswami, also in the assembly of Naimisharanya, of these sages, it was again the question, who's going to do the talking? And who did the talking there? Someone remembers? Huh? Now, when we talk about the sages of Naimisharanya, there was one speaker he pointed out, or was pointed out. And he speaks a lot of the Bhagavatam. He actually, Prabhupada in the Prabhupada says, he speaks the Bhagavatam from heart then, in all its cantos. Yeah, that is Sutta Goswami.
Yeah, but before Rumashan, his father started first.
Yes. I'm cutting a little bit short, just to get the layers. Yes, so we have the discussion of Shukadev, and then Sutta Goswami starts speaking. So we're moving into the third layer of the Bhagavatam. Sutta Goswami, and the prominent question asker is Shaunaka Rishi. Yes, Shaunaka is starting to ask questions to Sutta Goswami, which Sutta Goswami glorifies and starts to speak the Bhagavatam. So we have the setting of the Bhagavatam, we have the talk between Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami, and we have the talk between Sutta Goswami and Shaunaka and the other rishis. And then Sutta Goswami again, and this is the sometimes a little bit confusing thing in the Bhagavatam where we are at, because then he again talks about someone talking. And of course he starts off first canto, second canto, third canto, but then toward, I think, the end of the third canto, he starts telling about a devotee called Maitreya Muni. And Maitreya Muni starts actually instructing Vidura. And this is these instructions of Maitreya Muni and Vidura we've been studying at least for the whole fourth canto, because I'm pretty sure in the fourth canto Maitreya Muni is pretty much explaining that whole canto. He's before then, of course, starting to talk about Prithu Maharaj, the whole story of Prithu Maharaj, which I will not delve into because it's just happened. And then toward the end of the story of Prithu Maharaj, he describes the descendants of Prithu Maharaj, right? And then one of the descendants of Prithu Maharaj is Barishat, one of, not a son directly, but like a little bit removed a son. I'm not sure how many generations. And Barishat, he actually was very famous because he was so famous and so active that he actually got the nickname Prajapati. And he was very, very active and engaged in fruitive sacrifices, fruitive activities. But according to the Vedic instruction, so he had gurus and they taught him very well and he performed very well. He was really into it. Like one verse describes how he would continuously make sacrifices and spread kusha grass everywhere with the tips of the kusha grass pointing east. Now that's detailed, right? If you like throw kusha grass all over the place, but you make sure every single blade of grass is pointing in the right direction. I guess it's a little bit, I wondered, why is that mentioned? Maybe it's mentioned because it shows how detailed he was in his endeavor to really rightly and correctly perform fruitive activities. And he was super qualified doing it and got a lot of fame within the universe. We see it because his wife, who chose his wife? Lord Brahma himself. Right? He said, you should marry this lady. I don't know her name, but she must have been astoundingly beautiful, because it's explained how the whole universe was like, I would also marry her. I think if he didn't have it. I think Agni is mentioned. Even the Naga Lokas are mentioned. Even the Nagas go like, she's pretty. I wouldn't mind her. Right? So he had a beautiful wife. He had the blessings of Lord Brahma himself. He was expert in fruitive activity, and with his beautiful wife, he begot 10 sons. And these 10 sons are very famous, and they're called the Prachetas. And these Prachetas, they're especially famous because of their, almost insane amount of austerity. The Prachetas went out, they got from their father, Bodhishat, who was the nickname Prajapati, which then together gets this name that we're reading about now a lot, Prachinabhari. Yeah? Talks between Narada and King Prachinabhari. So Maitreya Muni is talking about this Bodhishat who becomes Prachinabhari and begets 10 sons, the Prachetas. So these Prachetas, they're also really far-out personalities. He tells them, my sons, please beget children and populate, basically. That was his instruction. So the sons, as back then was the custom. Anyone recognizes what yuga are we in now? When we're talking about the Prachetas and the filling of the world. Anyway, we might get a hint on that, because the Prachetas, they went off and said, okay, if we are going to do that, then we should perform some austerity. And they did. They went off and they looked for a suitable place for austerity, and they came upon a huge lake that is described to be almost as big as the ocean. And they felt some rather drawn to that for a good reason, because in this lake they actually got a darshan. Out of the lake rose Lord Shiva with his company. Pretty cool. And then Lord Shiva, this was I think the previous chapter, couple chapters before, Lord Shiva starts praying to the Lord, and later on Lord Shiva says, I gave you instructions of devotional service through my prayers to the Lord. And these prayers are very powerful, very beautiful, and the Prachetas also thought so, because they thought these were good prayers. When Shiva finished, he sort of disappeared, and then the Prachetas decided, okay, we're going to repeat these prayers. How long should we repeat them? Well, 10,000 years, that sounds pretty good. So they stayed in this lake. It said they stayed in there. I'm not sure if they went to but it's different yuga, maybe things work differently. But it's 10,000 years they were just hanging out in that lake. So when they spend 10,000 years in austerity, they might have a life of around 100,000 years. So then we say, okay, they can only do it because they live so long. But if we calculate it to our time, we live about 100 years. Go into a lake for 10 years, don't come out and just recite prayers. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty solid austerity, I'd say. Right? So they were doing that, and they were doing that for 10,000 years, so they were pretty busy. And while they were doing that, their father, he continued, though, in his fruitive activities. Funnily enough, his sons are praying about devotional service for 10,000 years, but he's busy like, okay, while they do that, I'm going to continue with my sacrifices. And Narada, seeing that situation, Narada Muni, he became compassionate and thought, this poor king, he's wasting his time. Let me go and instruct him. And then Maitreya Muni tells us about the conversation between Narada and
Prachinabhari.
Thank you. Yes, Prachinabhari. See, it's very confusing. So we have all these layers. We have the setting of the Bhagavatam. We have the conversation between Shukadev and Parikshit. So a second layer. Third layer, we have Sutta and Shaunaka. Then fourth layer, we are having Maitreya and Vidura. And then fifth layer now, we are 5 layers deep. We are hearing that conversation between Narada and King Prachinabhari. So that's where we are at. And Narada, of course, he instructs King Prachinabhari with a far-out story. And we've heard this story now for many chapters. It's already over now, but this is the story of Puranjana. Yes, it's a metaphor that he gives the king. And basically, this metaphor, it's about the body. What is actually the body? And it's a beautiful metaphor. He explains how the body has different gates, the eastern gate, the eyes, and these senses, and then we have one is the south, one is the west, one of the ears, and then we have the genitals and the anus as the Western gate, which I find very fitting, you know, it already hints at the glories of the West. And he gives this very precise metaphor, and he talks, for example, about the relevance of time through the 360 Gandharvas and 360 something. It's not so clear in my mind, but he gives a very nice metaphor just about what is the body, what is the subtle body, what is time, and most importantly, what is the importance of this human life, and what is the importance to do something with the time, to use it intelligently. And yeah, he does it all in a metaphoric form, and it's beautifully explained. The thing is just the king doesn't quite get it. After he explained everything, he's like, wow, this was really amazing, Narada. The problem is just like, and he says, like, yeah, and very qualified people would be able to understand what you're saying, but we didn't really get it. Could you again explain it without the metaphor? Could you take the metaphor away, and could you explain what you were actually saying? And this is what we're having right now. This is where we are now at. So Narada is explaining what he actually meant with this big metaphor of Puranjana. And the real focus on it, though, is really the idea, because the one thing that the king doesn't get, and this comes clear out of his questions, is the one thing that he doesn't get is after the whole metaphor of Puranjana, the king basically asked, yeah, I get all of these things, but one thing I really still don't understand, and this is far out what he's asking actually. He says, like, I don't quite get it, because I'm involved in fruitive activity, and when my body ceases, the result ceases. So how can I actually perform something for my next body? It doesn't work, because I'm losing my body, so how can I transfer anything into a next life? So after all these teachings, the question he comes back to is actually, am I not the body? Right? And this is really interesting. Now we are 5 layers deep into the Bhagavatam. We're really in the center of the Bhagavatam. We're deep in the philosophy. And what is it about? And then if you think to Prabhupada, who was like traveling around for years and giving lectures, if you like randomly take a class of Prabhupada, what is a very high liking that is the main topic in that class? Yes. And really, this is the first understanding in spiritual life. This is where spiritual life really starts. This is the Sambandha. That I understand who am I actually. Because the question of the king is astounding that he's asking it, but it's an intelligent question. He basically says, wait, this all doesn't make sense, because basically I don't even know who I am. So how can I understand how my activities influence me? Or what activities even are, right? So actually now, this verse, and yesterday's verse and the coming verses, Narada is asking the specific question. Who are we? What is the gross body? What is the subtle body? What is their relation? And again, what is their relation to the soul? So sometimes we think like, oh, this is the ABC of spiritual life, but the Bhagavatam seems to disagree. It's not the first time it brings up the point, it's not the last time it brings up the point. Prabhupada seems to disagree. It seems to be quite a solid, important point to make, that we are not this body, and therefore we need to understand what is this body. Because it's really interesting how I had this with Krishna Prem the other day, that I really like this verse, Raja Vidya Raja Guyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam Susukam Sartum Kartum Avyayam in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which explains that the science of yoga is Raja Vidya. It's the king, the highest knowledge, and also Raja Guyam. And Guyam means the secret. It's the highest secret. And then one can ask, what does that mean? It's nice sometimes to not only go like, oh, your highest secret, but also like, why does he say Raja Guyam? Why is this secret different to all the other secrets? So let's start to understand what is a secret. If I come to Vrindavan Chandra and you go like, oh, Vrindavan, I'm supposed to give class now, but I'm really worried because upstairs in my room I have like 200 euros just lying on the bed, and I'm worried that someone will steal it. I needed to confide in you, don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone. So now there is like a elite knowledge, 200 euros free for the taking in my room. Don't check, especially when you're brahmacharis. So this is an elite. Now we created an elite group. I know, he knows, you don't know. So this is the definition of a secret. We know, others don't know. But this is a mundane secret. It's not Raja Guyam, it's just a normal Guyam, normal secret. Why? Because if Vrindavan Chandra goes like, oh, the way that he talked to me this morning, I didn't like that, I'm going to get him back. It would never be in your character, I'm just making this up freely.
Took it already.
Very smart. So he decides, I'm going to get this Jananivas back, After he leaves the class, I'm going to tell him, hey guys, by the way, this weirdo, he has 200 euros, just go take it. And as soon as he decides to reveal this, it's not a secret anymore. So this is a mundane secret. So what's Rajaguyam, what's the supreme secret is that, what's the difference? Normal secret, elite group knows it, once you tell it, it's not a secret anymore. But the knowledge of the yoga, this is Rajaguyam, this is the kingly secret. Why? Because even if I tell you, you don't know. Like for example, this knowledge of, we're not this body, we're a spirit soul. We've heard that once or twice, right? But even if we hear it, just by hearing it, it still remains a mystery. We cannot understand it. It's not that just like, oh, okay, yeah, of course, all right. Next one, done. So why is that? Because Krishna says this quality of secret, this Rajaguyam, this secret of the soul is basically, this secret that is beyond the material, that can only be perceived how? Pratyaksha Vagamam Danyam, through direct perception. Not through mental speculation, not through the intellect, not through anything, but through yoga darshan, through direct sight of the actual thing. So Krishna says you have to realize it within the heart. You have to see it, actually see it, through the soul's eyes, through your consciousness. You have to see it in the heart in order for it to not be a secret anymore. So this is why we again and again and again, I was a little bit talking before with Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu about this amazing fact that the king, after this amazing story of Puranjana, he goes like, I didn't get it. And Prabhu said, like, this is comforting, isn't it? Because we are sort of in the same situation. Yes, we hear these things again and again, but have we really understood? For myself, I can say no, because so many times I catch myself acting like I was the body, even thinking like I was the body. And then we have to again to correct and go like, no, this is actually the ego. I'm identifying with the wrong thing. I need to adjust myself again. So after years and years and years and years and years and years of hearing this, still it didn't really arrive. The secret is not yet lifted. So now Narada tries to help the king to really lift the secret of his true self and how to achieve it. So this is where we are at now. And now, yes, now we can a little bit look into the verse. Because it's very interesting. Basically, it's the ABC again. We have different bodies when being in this material nature. The soul itself is non-material, so it cannot really mix with the material nature. It needs a agent in order to function in the material nature. It's like oil and water, right? You can shake it. It might seem to mix, but it never really mixes. So similarly, if you want to like go to the bottom of the ocean, we need the proper equipment to go there. Similarly, if the soul wants to go into the material world, it needs the proper equipment to go there. So to go to the bottom of the ocean, we need like a diving suit and flask or whatever. And in order to connect to the material nature, we need certain bodies that function within the material nature. And the most prominent of these bodies are the subtle body, the Sukshma Sharira, and the physical body. The gross body, we say sometimes, which is called the Stula Sharira. And these are the most prominent bodies we talk about because we all know that we have them. Just read the Lords for a sec. Jai Shishi, Gauri Nitai, Shri Sagar Paradev Subhadra Devi Ki. So, sometimes I think of it like, I'm from the generation where we were still listening to like, or playing video games. Yeah, when I was young, I played video games. And sometimes you log into these video games, and it's like a virtual reality that you log into. Like when I was young, still young, but some time ago, then I was playing this game, World of Warcraft. It's like a far-out game. It's like an online platform where you can like create a character on this online world where others also can log in, and you can make like a mystical character, like a dwarf or a magician or whatever. You can like make something, then you log into this platform and you sit there at your computer staring into the screen and like having this character, having this existence within this virtual reality. And one step removed, in one sense, that's a little bit what we're doing, isn't it? We're looking at the screen of the ahankara. We sort of, Adipurusha once described the ahankara as sort of like the looking glass, where the soul looks through, where it gets its vision of identification with something that it's not. That is the ahankara, right? It is the element that allows us to think that we are something that we are not. And the ahankara is a very, sometimes we think it's very abstract, but it's not at all actually, because the ahankara is in play all the time. For example, you can have a room full of people that are all sitting in darkness, staring at a wall where some light is coming to the wall. Yes, and there is people just in that situation. There's nothing in the room, there's nothing happening in the room. People are just sitting there and in darkness looking at like a wall with some light projected on it. And people cry and people get upset and people get really scared and they have real physical reaction. So what is that situation? Can anyone guess?
Cinema.
It's like the cinema, yes. Yeah, there's like a room and there's some light projected in the front, it's like the screen, and there is something happening, I don't know, some movie is running, Titanic. Leonardo DiCaprio is just drowning and everyone's like, oh Jack, oh no, don't drown, right? And people get really emotional. You must have experienced watching a movie or something and you're like, oh, there's a tear coming. It's real for now. And this is the ahankara at work. We have the ability to identify with something emotionally, even if we know that it's not true, right? We know that this is nothing, no one drowned, this is just Leo in a big pool with cameras all around him, you know, like, oh, I'm drowning. No one's drowning, but we are like super emotional about it. Why? Because we are able to identify with something that we are not. This game that I was playing, this World of Warcraft, there was like my mother, of course, she didn't want me to play it, so she once came and she brought me this newspaper article of some guy in China who also played that game. But he played that game for 38 hours straight without drinking, without eating, without sleeping, and he collapsed and died. So he identified with this weird artificial character on that screen, so much so that he completely neglected his own body. To the point of death. Isn't that incredible? This is the ahankara at work. And in a sense, this is what we are doing again. We are identifying so much with this physical body in subtle and gross forms that we basically completely let our spiritual self die. Right? So the ahankara is sort of the looking glass where the soul goes like, okay, I'm looking at the material world. And then within it, the main vessel that the soul is basically traveling in is the rest of the subtle body, which is the manas and the buddhi, the mind and the intelligence. And of course we can now, then the mind has different functions and interacts through thinking, feeling and willing, right, and accepting, rejecting and so on. So we have this subtle body in its qualities, and of course then the subtle body though, and Krishna Prema explained that yesterday very nicely, that when the subtle body carries certain desires, then according to these desires, it changes its form and basically spawns according to its present form a material body, which is then striving to take the form that the spiritual body is projecting on it. And this is happening and again and again. Not the spiritual body, sorry, the subtle body. The subtle body basically remains with us throughout the soul journey through the material world. Right? And it is the gross body that is continuously changing. So this is basically, now we are really at this verse. Now we are a little bit talking about what's going on. Because when we have the material body, we have the five senses fully manifest. Yes? Which is again, like if you come back to this idea of if we want to dive in the ocean, we need like a proper equipment, we need the diving suit. Then if we want to connect to the gross material world, then we need a body fit to have exchanges with these elements that make up the gross material world. And the Vedic scriptures say that there's 5 basic elements making up this really external gross world. And of course there's more than 5 elements. Scientists might say there's hundreds, and we don't necessarily disagree, but the Vedic culture is very precise, so it gives like 5 categories. So we have the category of ur, of earth, which means solid materials, things that are actually that you can really grab. Then we have jal, the water, which is all sort of liquid elements that we have. It's a category of elements. And then we have fire, which is radiant elements. Ramakanta in Bhagavad Gita class a couple of days ago was talking about electricity as a manifestation of fire. So anything that radiates, creates heat, like that. And then we have air, yes. So which is gas-like elements. And then we have space, akash, which is like the capacity of elements, which gives the other ones room to move, right? And so, in order to perceive these elements, we then need senses to do that. We need the equipment to actually, see that stuff. Because again, the vision of the soul is completely different than this material nature. So, according to these elements, we get senses. So the element of earth, what is the main function of earth? The thing that is unique to it. Which sense belongs to the element of earth?
Smell.
The smell, yes. Because if we smell something, it means there is something solid. If we smell something, that means whatever we are smelling, we have particles of that within our nostrils. Think about that next time you go to the bathroom. Yes. Or when you walk through roses, it can also be a positive experience. Sometimes the negative experiences are more fun, right? So, yes, so in order to perceive smell, we need, of course, the nose. That's the sense that then connects to that element through the activity of smell. Then we have the water. What is that?
Taste.
Taste, yes. Without liquid, we cannot taste. If you have a very dry mouth, even if you eat something, there's no taste, right? Yes, and then we have the next, which is the fire, and that is, the eyes, the seeing. The seeing connects with the fire. The form, without light we cannot see. So, let's have that relationship. And then the next more subtle is the air. So, what sense is that? The touch. And then we have just the space, and the only thing that travels through space is the sound. And this is actually interesting how we can see how through all these bodies we now went basically through the main, now we are missing the prana a little bit, but we are going through the main ingredients of this material existence, starting with the ahankara, the ability itself to identify with any of this, to play the game, because it's like, if you're in the movie, like we just said, and someone goes like, in the middle of the movie, Leo is just dying, and then someone goes like, oh, this is a movie anyway, turn on the lights. What will everyone else say? Like, shut up, sit down, right? So we actually, if we want to have the experience, we need the illusion, and if someone is disturbed, and we have that experience, right? If someone's really in their material illusion, goes like, this is great. We did kirtan in Leipzig, on the street, just sitting kirtan. And then someone comes by and gets really angry. Like, what are you doing? And I'm just thinking, why don't you just walk past? Why do you stand there yelling at us? Well, because we're the guys switching on the light in the cinema. He goes like, I don't want to, Leo, And so we sometimes want to stay in our illusion. I also can see that in myself, right? So this is the ahankara, and then it becomes more and more gross. The buddhi is the next gross. And then we have the mind, because the buddhi should be controlling the mind. Could give a whole lecture about how that mostly doesn't work, but that's how it's supposed to be. And then the elements are also really interesting, because we have like the space element. And the space you can really only hear. But then you have the next gross element, you have the air, and the air you can hear and you can feel. And then you have the next gross element, you have the fire, and the fire you can hear, you can feel, and you can see. Then you have the next gross element, you have the water, you can hear it, feel it, see it, and taste it. And then earth is the most gross. This is like where the material nature is at its most manifest point, because earth you can hear, you can feel, you can see, you can taste, and you can smell. So all 5 senses are active within the earth experience. So that's also why the more gross the experience, the more entangling. That's why sex life, which involves also the element of earth, and therefore all senses and the mind and the intellect, and of course the ahankara in its fullest aspect, is one of the most entangling material activities. Of course there's other reasons, but this is like a very scientific perspective on it, yeah. It's just the full experience. Everything's going on now, yeah. You cannot think of anything else when you do that. That's also a form. That's the opposite of samadhi in a sense. You're fully into the material experience. That's why it's often given as the main activity. That go like, okay, try to maybe give that up. We had that yesterday. You can only walk in one direction, so try to give up that, and therefore get the spiritual benefit. So, and this gross material experience is the one that, when the ahankara is very strong, we identify mostly with this body. And we see that also in the fear that we have of losing this body, for example. Right? And then, of course, if we get a little bit more advanced, there's a lot of philosophers in the 20th century, in Germany, for example, other places also, and also before, again and again, who realize, I'm not this body, I'm the mind. Yes, and of course, then the next layer is to understand, but I'm not even the mind, because also the mind is changing. So what we have here is then that when I then, in this gross physical body, associate with the sense objects, the thing is, whenever I associate with the material nature, I create samskara. So I create an imprint of that. I can never forget any experience that I have here. Anything that we experience in the material world, it stays in the subtle body in the form of samskaras and vasanas. So samskaras right now we're creating a samskara. It's an impression in the subtle body. We're basically, you will be, well, this is a bit too much, but you will be sort of destined to always, for the rest of your material experience, walk around with this class of Jananivas Dasa. So now you can second guess if it was a good idea to ask, right? We can, like, once you've seen, you can never make unseen. That's actually powerful in this material world. It really shows how responsible of an activity it is to live here, because whatever we decide to look at, that's it. We've seen it. The samskara is there, and we cannot, yes we can, but only through Krishna, only through spiritual activity. In the material context, that's it. You have this impression. And then, of course, if you repeat the samskara, like you try the cigarette, it's like, oh, this is disgusting, but my friends, it's cool, suits my glasses. So then I do it again, okay, a little bit better, again and again. And if I then stack the samskaras, we create a vasana, a tendency. And then it becomes a habit, and then it becomes very hard to get rid of. But even whatever I experience, whatever little thing I see, it is imprinted as a samskara in the subtle body. So therefore, even then, if I lose my material body, if my prana is running out, because we were in the computer game, we have the hardware, we're looking into this screen, and this is the body, and then we also have the software that is managing the screen and the computer and everything. That's the subtle body, right? The gross body is like, okay, this is just the machine, and the subtle body is the program that basically steers the machine, right? So what is needed that software and hardware communicate? Electricity, the prana, right? So as long as there's prana, then the body and the mind can stay connected. When the prana runs out, they separate. That's what we call death. But it's not actually, from the perspective of us, it's not death at all. Because as soon as you die, you come back into a state that you will recognize. And there's many reports of that, even in the mundane world. I've been to a near-death experience. I knew this place. I've always been in this place. Yes, this is the place of the mind. Because the mind has been with us through this whole experience. And when we leave the body and come back to the mind, we remember who we are. Of course, we don't really remember. We just remember the state of the mind. But this is then who we identify with, right? So this identification stays. It only sort of ceases when we get an even grosser identification, that I get a body and then I identify with that. Then I might forget my mind. But if I then die, I come back to the state of the mind. But whatever experience the mind had through the senses of the body, they stay. And this is what we're seeing here, that even if the living entity is disconnected from the body, already in this life, for example, when the living entity dreams, the sense objects are not really present. However, one has associated with the sense objects in the physical body, we've seen them, and therefore they become manifest. Yes, because we have these samskaras, they become manifest. And also when Prabhupada explains dreams, he explains it like that. You might dream of a golden mountain that doesn't exist. But the gold exists and the mountain exists. So the samskaras are real, and now they're just mixed into this experience of the dream. But the ingredients of the dream are there through the experience of the sense objects. So similarly, the living entity with undeveloped senses does not cease to exist materially. And also not of course it exists spiritually, but also this, wow, I've seen my eternal form. Probably not, probably we perceive the mind. We do not cease to exist materially, even if we lose this body, because also the mind is a material body, even though he may not be exactly in contact with the sense objects. Right now I don't have a body, I'm back into that mind state, and therefore I'm not directly in contact with the sense objects, but I still have these impressions within me. And therefore then Narada, of course, continues teaching the king that, well, therefore, be very mindful what experiences you have, and be very sure that whatever experience you have with this body, it will carry on. It will not only carry on in the next body, but whatever experience you have, you will carry that for the rest of your material existence. So be very mindful what experience you're inviting. And therefore, of course, he comes to a conclusion that we very much agree to later on, where he basically explains that we are not this body, and therefore we should not only look for results in the next life, but look for eternal results that are even beyond the mental body, which means spiritual activity, especially the chanting and the engagement in devotional service. Narada really nicely actually concludes his teachings, saying that the allegory of King Puranjana described herein, according to authority, was heard by me from my spiritual master, and it is full of spiritual knowledge. If one can understand the purpose of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will clearly understand life after death. Although one may not understand what transmigration of the soul actually is, one can fully understand it by studying this narration. Right? Just by studying this amazing metaphor, we can actually understand what transmigration of the soul is. And what does King Prajinabhari do after this instruction? He goes off and practices devotional service. Because now he's heard it, he believes it, but again, of course, it's Rajaguyam. He can't just hear it and understand it. Now he has to go and practice till the rest of his life, so he can get as close to that realization as possible to then hopefully not return to a physical or mental state. Hare Krishna. Okay, so this is a little bit what I thought about this verse. If you have some comment or questions or also correction, I'll be very happy. Please speak now or be quiet till breakfast. Yes, sir.
I was just one question I was thinking the other day about, we were saying how when we smell something we can understand that it's actually air transporting some small particles. And this kind of makes sense in terms of how the earth element is more gross, and the air is subtle, so it can carry it. But I'm not so sure how the ether element is connected to sound, and air can also carry sound. Sometimes we have this experience when the wind goes in a certain direction, we can hear sound from far, far away, and in other times we cannot. How it works? How is it possible that the wind carries sound vibration? Somehow
because it's like in one direction, not in the other. So Akash can only be perceived through sound. Right? This is like the only corresponding, But then air, for example, it can be perceived. Its main contribution to the mix is touch, but it also includes the element of sound. And then if we go down again to fire, then we also get the special feature of fire, which is sight. But it also carries sound and touch. And so it moves on. So yes, the other way around it doesn't work. You cannot smell Akash, but you can hear the earth, obviously.
Yeah.
So the earth holds all the elements, all the senses. Earth can engage all the senses. You can experience earth with all 5 senses, but you can experience space only with 1. But air, as you rightly say, definitely interacts with sound.
Right.
Yeah. So it only
it's logical.
Yeah, it's logical.
So basically, it's the wind which carries the sound.
Yes. Yeah, it moves it because it can interact with the sound.
Yeah.
So if there is just the Akash, then there's just the sound without movement, basically, without touch. Yeah. So that's why also it said, like, because we can, it's very easy to understand also. Like, what is separating us right now is space. And what is connecting us right now is sound. Yeah. So through sound, we can then understand space. They correlate each other. And also, how was space created? When we look at the creation?
Through sound.
Yeah, through sound. It's very interesting like that, isn't it? Maybe just for me, but I find this stuff fascinating. Yeah. And then, yeah.
But you're saying space is separating us, it's also connecting us. It's like both, no?
Because it's giving like the capacity.
Yeah. Situated in the same space, so somehow by connecting to that Akash element, we can actually feel connection with everything.
Much more sublimely than, for example, to the earth. Very true. The more you go, the more subtle you go with the element that the connection is on, the more profound is the experience. Yes, therefore Akash can be a nice way to connect. But of course then consciousness is the even nicer way to connect. Because then in the spiritual world there's also space, but how is it there? It's perceived through its absence. So nice. Yeah. Because the problem here is with Akash, that we are subordinate to Akash. That we are the servants in the sense of the material elements. We cannot change it. The distance between here and Siri Lake, even if you really want to go swim in 5 minutes, your problem. You have to walk there all the way. So we are dependent of the space.
Unless you have mystic powers.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. Then this becomes that's then again the Shiva, the prana level. That's the in-between kingdom, the Tatastha, where it's sort of possible and not. But in the spiritual world, how does it go? Krishna wants to go somewhere. Depending on the lila he's planning, the way will be long or short. So it's not that in the spiritual world space is there, but subordinate to the lila. And here the lila is subordinate to the space. Yeah, we can do Harinam, but we have to walk all the way. And maybe if the devotees in the spiritual world go like, oh, I'm hungry, then suddenly the way to the next restaurant is like 2 steps, because now it's time for eating. So that's like how space is like a spiritual element, but it's perverted of course, it's the reflection of space here that we experience. So space in the spiritual world is serving the experience of serving Krishna. Space in the material world is doing the opposite, is basically creating separation. Yeah.
But then the question becomes, can you really say that this space element here is completely material? Because when Krishna came, he came to this planet. But when he acted, for example, when he ran away from, what was his name?
And he could never reach him. What?
Shiju?
No. Not John.
Who he was killing in the cave then.
He went to Muchukunda.
To Muchukunda to wake him. Yeah, it is.
But obviously he also had the ability to somehow adjust the whole situation.
Yeah, because when Krishna comes, he doesn't come alone. He brings the whole kitchen sink, everything. He brings the spiritual world. Yeah, don't ask me how that works, man. This is next level stuff. When Krishna interacts with this material world,
because
everything.
It's his energy.
Yeah, it's his.
Do whatever he likes.
And he cannot be, he cannot be. Yeah, these rules work for us. And actually, and this is where we come to the mystical platform. They only work for us on the material plane if we identify with them. So this is the game. You identify with the body, and then you have to identify with the rules according to this body. But of course, our essence, our spirit soul is not dependent on that. And the yogi, of course, what he does, he is basically bringing the material body, in one sense, to the subtle platform. So then also he can go beyond the physical elements, even with the physical body. This, then we can study the Yoga Sutras. The Patanjali 3rd chapter, he describes it quite well. Edwin Bryant's version, really helpful. So it in Krishna. If anyone wants to read it. Yeah, very interesting stuff. But this is then how the mystical powers work. But yeah, we experience as devotees, know that the material laws don't apply so much anymore when you start engaging with Krishna, because then we're reaching the spiritual platform, and then things just happen that are very hard to explain from a material point of view. And we just have to look at Prabhupada's biography or so to see things that happen that go like they are beyond space and time, definitely. We need rent for the temple. We walk down the temple, there's an envelope lying on the floor with the money for the rent. So this is then when Krishna gets involved, things don't make sense anymore from a material perspective. From a spiritual perspective, of course, all the more. But yeah, this is then this level of, then we can really get a nice discussion on how that actually works, because I don't know. And I couldn't claim to be able to explain it either. Yeah. Maybe someone else has a comment on that. It's a nice point. See, like if we would be in the spiritual world now, it would be like 8:15. And if we wanted to speak for another half an hour, it would remain 8:15 for a while. But now, because we're in the material context, it's already a little bit over time. So we probably have to surrender to the material context in this sense. Finish it. Unless someone really wants to say something. Okay, then thank you for letting me speak a little bit. And please forgive any weirder things I've said. And you just start speaking, and then you start speaking, later on you think like, oh, what did I say? And then you become mental about it. So I hope if it was okay, that's nice. And if it wasn't okay, please tell me. Sometimes we say silly things on the Vyasa-san, and then people go like, he said silly. Yeah, just say it. If something was wrong. It's nice also to tell each other that we are wrong. Like criticism in Vaishnava is, if I criticize someone, it's a compliment, isn't it? I see like, oh, you have the capacity to understand how it's actually done. So I'm going to offer my time to now tell you. If someone wouldn't see, my Guru Maharaj criticized me once or twice. And I think if he wouldn't have seen the capacity for me to understand the criticism, he wouldn't have bothered. So criticism is like a blessing, I think. So please criticize me as much as you like after the class, during breakfast or so. But okay, now I'll shut up. So Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jananivas Dasa jai.
Stimmt das nicht so sehr, oder ist das nicht? Gut.
Ich habe nur gechantet. Und kann ich missioniert sein. Ich sollte ja sprichst mit den anderen verschieden.
Also ich habe immer versucht, alle zweimal gespielt. Das ist schon ein bisschen so gemacht. So freue mich.
Zuerst jetzt ein Arsch. Ich habe den Körper offen. Jetzt haben wir mich vorgesehen.
Ah, wirklich? Ja. Ich mag ihn erst.
Das ist so ein schönes Herz.
Ja, das ist nicht so. Wenigstens einer, der sich umfällt. Ich glaube, wenn man nicht stark macht, weißt du. You can do left side and straight also. Usually Vaishnava can do. Usually do left side. Right. Krishna. You do left side. And Guru, you can do left side. But you can also do straight. You understand? But proper, then your feet go in this direction. Your feet. So you cannot put your feet to the gate. Do you understand? Which language is your language? Ukraine. This is a Ukrainian. Oh, no. Okay. When we offer obeisances to Vaishnav, then we can also do straight. But the problem here, when we offer obeisances to the Vaishnava, we can also do straight. But the problem is then our feet point in direction to the deities, so that's an offense. Translation. Devotee. What's your name?
Das.
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 Hare Rama. Each program is so nice. On Sunday, sometimes we not able to come every Sunday, but whenever very small, so they like it. And also, I think it's so different from how we experience outside. They feel so connected, and we also want them to feel connected to Indian roots, Krishna roots. So, Vedas, yes.
Yes, but it's in German.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Hare
There's the saying though.